Hello, everyone. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, the official Marvel Snap Zone podcast. And today, what I'd like to talk to you all about is the Marvel Snapped Ranked Meta tier list for July 31st, 2023. The legendary Den has released his most recent tier list, and I think it's amazingly interesting, and there's a lot to glean about the meta and where things are going based on it. So I want to talk to you about that. Before we get there, though, I'd like to let you know that I'm currently doing the biggest giveaway in the history of Marvel Snap. I'm giving away, as of this point, 6 Marvel Snap season passes for the deck and season. If you would prefer Phoenix, you'll have like a day to get that information to me. I'm also giving away that giant death bundle for $75 as a grand prize on top of those 6 season passes, and the number of season passes can go up. We're also giving away some Marvel Snap Zone premium subscriptions, 3 of them to be exact, because Den is doing coaching there, and I think Den is a legend, and it's 1,000% worth knowing about him. All of that can be found on my YouTube and Twitter. You can see that on the screen in front of you. I'm also going to throw the link in the description to the video and up in the corner. So hopefully you click that, give it a chance. Let's talk about the tier list. First thing to know about this list is it is purely data driven. This is basically all about cube rate on ladder. This is not a conquest tier list, and I know a lot of us have reached infinite. Also, a lot of us haven't, but a lot of us have reached infinite, and those who have are sitting there like, okay, I'm going to play a lot of conquest right now, so ladder's not the most interesting. But there's still a lot of people trying to climb, and trying to climb is important. That's why this week's top 5 is a top 5 series 3 only decks to climb on ladder with, because that demographic often gets overlooked when we're talking about the game. This is for people who are trying to climb on ladder, but there's a lot we can learn about conquest from it. We're going to scroll down right here to the actual list. The silent performers are Bounce and Thanos Zoo. I'm a little surprised that Thanos Zoo is there. I've never found Thanos Zoo to be incredible. I'm less surprised at Bounce still performing well on ladder. I don't think it's especially good in Conquest, where everyone knows how to play against it, but on ladder, it's still often a surprise, and even more than that, it's an amazing bot farmer deck. We've got way more tier 1 decks than usual this week, so I want to talk about what those tier 1 decks are, what makes them so good, and where I'm actually surprised about them. And tier 2 is also humongous. This is a wildly varied metagame. Let's get into the decks. Okay, tier 1, the first deck is Good Card Stature. This is ridiculously close to the original list built by Safety Blade. I think it's running Iron Lad instead of running originally Nightcrawler and then Nebula in that one extra 1 cost slot. The deck just stays good. It's taken 3 nerfs, 1 to Rock Slide, Stature, Black Bolt, and then a sort of buff, then nerf to Enchantress, and the older buff to Zabu and Darkhawk, obviously. And the deck still does nothing but perform. You do not need Iron Lad for this list. A good cheap card is often better, but Iron Lad is a very, very good card, and in the top performing versions. If you're not running Jeff, you're going to want to be running Nightcrawler, because enabling Miles is really, really nice here. That's also why Polaris is here. These are good tempo cards that give you a good double play with a lot of power on turn 4 when you have Zabu or on the last turn of the game. This deck is really good. It's one of the best climbers always, because you've got Shang-Chi and Enchantress on top of your Darkhawk Stature Black Bolt type combos, so it's really easy to snap with. So this is always a really good cube gaining deck. Would I play this version in Conquest? Not necessarily. This is a ladder deck to me, although this one does perform really well in Conquest, at least according to the stats. We scroll down past how to play. We've got a Legion version of this. If you're new to my content, you might not know this, but I've been a Legion stan since before release. I think he's one of the coolest cards like in the history of the game. I'm absolutely in love with Legion. This is the version more or less that I'm playing. I've got a slightly different version, but I think this deck is where you want to be, because Legion is a cube stealer. The sheer amount of games, and I know there doesn't appear to be anything to take advantage, but the sheer amount of games where there's just something you can do to lock a game with Legion is absolutely absurd. Legion also cancels out their Legion nonsense if they're planning on doing the Storm stuff and you have priority, and it's very easy to steal priority with this deck. What you do is you play Legion in a different location, it's going to turn every location into whatever that other location is, right? And then the opponent's Legion is just copying the same location you just turned everything into. It's amazingly powerful. It's a great way to snap back, get a lot of power. You're losing a little bit with the lack of stature and miles here, so there's a little bit less top end power here, but you're making up for it with a little bit of extra control. Let's keep going. We've got Sarah Surfer. I'm going to straight up tell you, this absolutely shocks me that it's still in tier 1. On Conquest, I don't think this deck is very good anymore. In Conquest, I think this is actually a below average deck, but Sarah Surfer on ladder still apparently cleans up. And a lot of that is the power of the control elements, right? This deck is built around Storm and Juggernaut. Storm to lock down a lane, Juggernaut to kick things out, and then Goose helps protect a lane from their big stuff, while Cosmo and Shadow King shut another lane, or Cosmo or Shadow King, not in. Cosmo or Shadow King shut another lane down. On ladder, Sarah is fantastic. She offers you these real explosive last turns, which help you farm other people on ladder. In Conquest mode, however, that spot is much better for Spider-Man. Sarah is better at winning a lot of cubes quickly, but your opponent, whereas your opponent just retreats when you've stormed one lane and Spider-Man another, you're not gaining cubes as quickly on ladder with the Spider-Man version as the Sarah version. I do think the Spider-Man version is different, but largely is good. This deck is still really strong. Again, I don't think you should be playing this in Conquest, but on ladder, this is one of the best climbers. I've hit infinite with versions of this. Our friend Lauren, whatever, one of the best writers in the game, hit infinite with this deck 2 seasons in a row. It's worth playing. Let's keep looking. This is the Lockdown Surfer with Spider-Man, as mentioned. Thanos Control is the deck to beat. It is the most consistent thing in the game. It has a meta answer, and we saw that in a tournament deck that we're going to either get to later. Maybe no one was playing it yet, but as of this tier list. But there's a double She-Hulk High Evolutionary list that is currently the class of the meta that fundamentally shuts this down. This also has a bad matchup into those Darkhawk decks. All of that said, this deck is a nightmare to play against. Whether you've played this or played against it, you will realize how frustrating and difficult it is to do anything. This is one of the biggest reasons to pack Killmonger, because a turn 3, turn 4 Killmonger is still extremely, extremely strong, 4 with priority, in making that Professor X on turn 4 not effective, because that's what this deck wants to do. Wants a Psylocke and Time Stone to get Professor X out, and if it messes up Professor X, it's got the Jeff and the Claw to make up for that. You can probably play this without Jeff. It takes a hit. Armor could be in the deck. You could play lots of different things. If you're worried about big things, Valkyrie could be in that Claw spot. There's lots of different little ways to pump this deck up. It, like Jeff and Iron Lad, are both important, but they're not absolutely pivotal pieces and can be other things as necessary. I've never loved Luke Cage in it. I understand why he's here. There's enough high evo in the meta for that. There's enough negative locations for that really mess with Thanos, right? Like the stones don't really like a -2 or -3 location. Fine, I get Luke Cage. I don't love him. I tend to prefer armor in that spot, or even another 1-drop. But here we are. This deck was created by W, the former Wobolos, who was on this Snap Judgments podcast about a week and a half back. If you'd like to hear him talk about the top 10 sleeper decks, check that out. I don't think this is necessarily the best deck anymore, but I think it's the best deck for climbing. I think this is straightforward and freaking super hard to beat, and just like prints cubes and wins. It would not shock me down the line to see this deck cause a nerf to like Professor X or a card similar. We're on to Sarah Control. This is, again, a list that just performs. Sarah just seems like it's so well positioned right now in the meta. This version is a very control-y version. It's basically using Kitty, Angela, Bishop. It's using the original bounce core. Kitty, Angela, Bishop, Mysterio, and Hitmonkey as like a last turn power surge. And it's got the choice with Scarlet Witch to basically say all of the opponent's magics, and magic is everywhere now. To say all of your opponent's magics disappear. I can go off that last turn. I can play Hitmonkey for 2, Mysterio for 1, that's 3, right? Kitty for 1, that's 4. And then drop, I don't know, a Scarlet Witch and destroy that Limbo and win the game with Scarlet Witch. or it can drop a Shang-Chi in there or another similar card. Zabu is really, really good here to get Shang and Enchantress in combination with multiple other power cards in this deck. I don't love this version. I think the Darkhawk versions of this are a little stronger right now because this deck requires a lot to go right, whereas the Darkhawk decks can still overwhelm with power. But the Darkhawk versions, I mean, I guess they both have a bunch of high series cards, right? It's Darkhawk or Hitmonkey, whichever one you have is the version you should play. But like I tend to think the Darkhawk versions are even stronger than this one. Our friend Peaceful Sea had a really good version of that. If you want to go check out Peaceful Sea Snap, you're gonna have to type Snap in because there's a lot of Peaceful Seas in the world, right? But you're gonna have to check out Peaceful Sea Snap in order to see that list. We've covered it on my channel too, but and in sleeper decks. But this is great. Sarah's gonna be tier 1, I think, for the foreseeable future without like a major nerf. It's too good at taking cubes from opponents who aren't ready, and it's like the best bot farmer in the game because the bots never really properly plan for the control pieces. They don't like worry about Shang or Enchantress, so it's easy to get those off. And Kitty always makes it easier to lose priority, which makes those Shang and Enchantress better. Just gonna say, I badly miss Invisible Woman whenever I don't play her in these decks because I have to play so carefully around priority when I don't have her versus when I have her. I know that like on turn 6 I can drop Invisible Woman Shang-Chi for 3 of my mana. That still leaves me enough for Hitmonkey and Mysterio, and that's usually enough to win a game, even if I had priority going in. Let's keep looking. We're down to tier 2. This actually surprises me more than anything. I thought this would for sure be a tier 1 deck because on ladder this feels like it dominates, but the presence of Shang-Chi and only armor to protect your big stuff keeps it down, right? This deck is fundamentally, I think, the best Series 3 only deck in the game. Toss up between this and Surfer, I guess. It's really strong, right? It wants to play Sauron so that Red Skull, Lizard, Maw, and Typhoid don't have negatives. Nebula just sits there gaining power, controls where your opponent plays. Zero is a nice backup to Sauron, especially early on for Maw or Lizard, so you're not losing too much tempo. Armor protects your stuff, and Enchantress gives you an out should the Typhoid Marrier or Red Skull negatives be too much. This version runs Vision. I cannot run this deck without She-Hulk. I also put America Chavez in mine and run just like I cut, I believe, Nebula and Vision for She-Hulk and America. I want the option on the last turn of the game to skip 5 or 6, as the case may be, and drop 36 power by going She-Hulk, by going Shuri, skip She-Hulk into Taskmaster. I think that's too strong to give up. And I love the consistency of America because this is 2 different decks. This is a deck when it sees Sauron and Shuri, and a deck when it doesn't see Sauron and Shuri. Honestly, it's almost a deck when it sees Sauron and when it doesn't see Sauron. Sauron is extremely powerful in this deck and is what makes it sing. This deck, I'm calling it now, will be tier 1 with a tweak or 2 going forward. Let's keep looking. We've got Devil Darkhawk. This deck just never dies. I think I have a better version of this in a video going live on my channel today. But like either way, this deck never dies. Devil Dinosaur and Darkhawk are the peanut butter and jelly of Marvel Snap. The deck, since it was released, has been good. This is a good version of a good deck. And the card that comes out later on, Mirage, actually depending on when this gets posted, maybe it's been out for a few hours, whatever. Mirage is absolutely stellar for this deck in that Sentinel spot. Mirage basically gives you an extra card in hand, just like Sentinel. That will be discounted by Quinjet. That will power up Devil Dinosaur, but it gets +2 power. It's a great card. I think it's almost certainly worth it for this deck. Everything else is fairly self-explanatory. Nick Fury is like a high roll card here. It either adds a bunch of cards to your hand for Devil Dinosaur, or it if you have Quinjet out, gives you 2 6-drops that you could potentially play. Or you can play 1 6-drop and Devil Dinosaur, 1 6-drop and Darkhawk. If you've got Zebu out, you can play 1 6-drop on 5, and then Rock Slide and Darkhawk, or Shang-Chi and Darkhawk. There's a lot of combos, a lot of great plays, and a lot of power. The sheer amount of time I lose to a deck like this, and then I look at what beat me, and it's cards created by Coulson, is ridiculous. It's like, oh, they gave them the Enchantress they needed. That's fun. This deck is strong. I personally do not believe Mystique should really be here, but hey, to each their own. They're like worse plays in the game than Zabu into Mystique or Cosmo into Mystique. Once in a while, that'll just completely lock out an opponent's deck, and it's a really great feeling. We've got Evo. This is not even lockdown. This is just straight up Evo. I'm trying to play She-Hulk and double She-Hulk and double Abomination. I don't know how you look at this version of the deck and don't go, I should be running Moon Girl, but like here we are. It's this deck isn't currently running Moon Girl. I think Moon Girl is one of the better potential cards in the in this deck, and it should absolutely be there. Um, Everything else is really like straightforward, right? Like you play Sunspot on one, Misty on two, and then you would like to get like a Hazmat out um on around turn three, or a Cyclops out and then Hazmat on four. Either which way works just fine. And you want to get as many things negative power as possible because you want to be able to play Abomination and She-Hulk for really cheap. That's basically the gist of the deck. If you can get Abomination and She-Hulk to like one-ish each, you can play them both with Thing. That's 27 power on the last turn of the game. You will hopefully note that that is less power than is put out by that She-Hulk Shuri plan earlier, but you have things like Hazmat Luke Cage to make up the difference. You have Hulk as a high roll. You have Cyclops to help you out, Wasp to help you out, Sunspot to gain power, and Misty to gain power to hopefully make up the difference. I'm going to be completely honest. I think this deck is good. A little surprised to see it this high. I still think this is too inconsistent. I think the current double up versions that are winning tournaments are significantly better and don't really require a much higher investment in cards. Evolved Lockjaw will never go anywhere. This is like almost exactly my build. I'm so proud of this. When Spider Ham came out, I rebuilt the deck to include Infinite and Dracula again when everyone else had been running like Doom and Odin. And I actually for a little bit ran I never remember that one card's name. It's the one card I never remember. 614 can only be played in the left lane. Whatever card that is. It's gonna come to me in the middle of talking about this. But that card over Magneto. Eventually, the presence of both Darkhawk and Surfer made me put Magneto back in. But like, hey, this is like my list. That's so cool, especially when Spider-Man costs one. I think the two cost nerf is actually a real buff, a real cost here, because on turn four, it was often very nice to go Lockjaw and Spider-Ham, and you no longer have that option. Like on turn three, you would play Thor, right? And then on turn four, you go Spider-Ham Lockjaw, and that was really good. This deck has taken a hit in power. I think the Spider-Ham is nearly as much of a hit as the Hulk and Wasp thing, although being able to play Wasp like 4 times was significant power for this deck. 3 times was honestly the reasonable number, not 4, but whatever. Hulk also not gaining power unless he's either on board, which happens more often than not with Lockjaw, or in hand is also a big nerf. This deck is worse, right? Is it still a great deck? Yes. This is one of the easiest decks to climb within the game. If you're looking to climb and struggling with the game, play this deck. And Lockjaw reveal. Sorry. There's also the version of Lockjaw that just foregoes High Evolutionary altogether and runs the more classic build. I don't think this version is very good. I'm gonna be honest. The stats are good. I don't like it. I think that the Doom nerf really hurt it to the point where like I don't have to have much there for like my Jeff to beat it, and now my claws are comfortably beating it. Professor X is everywhere to cause it trouble. I just don't like this deck very much. If you think it's great, great. This used to be very similar to what I played. Teebs, a phenomenal content creator over on Twitch, played a version of this that I played to great success. This one, I think, has fallen off in the meantime by things that can drop just more power. Evolved Lockdown seems like it'll never go anywhere. I'm playing Legion Lockdown now over Evolved Lockdown. Evolved Lockdown beats Legion Lockdown, but Legion Lockdown beats more other stuff. So it's a awkward rock, paper, scissors thing. Legion Lockdown has a better matchup into a lot of the big power stuff you're seeing elsewhere on this list. Whereas Evolved Lockdown just gives the Legion Lockdown, unless it has Luke, enough negatives that it can't really compete. Um, this deck is still really good, right? Like, if your meta hasn't evolved to the point where everyone's just dropping like 40 power infinite nonsense, everywhere or like playing double She-Hulks in your face, then this deck's gonna win a lot of games. Um, there are versions that run wave, and I think those versions are necessary in the meta. I think those versions are kind of how you answer a lot of the magic stuff going around. Because if you time that wave right, you should still be able to like shut down the game. And you've got Daredevil to decide on Spider-Man versus Wave once you see what they're doing on turn 5. I think that's probably how this comes back into the meta. But like this deck is just always going to perform because it's so frustrating to play against. There's some games where this just locks the opponent out and there's nothing they can do about it. Oh, this is the Legion version. This isn't my Legion version. My Legion version is a little different. I actually stole one from the tournament the other day, but this is a good standard version of the Legion lockdown. It basically runs the same combo as usual, but it wants to storm on turn 4, so it can Legion on turn 5. I really, really, really like Miles Morales and a little move package in these so that I can play Storm and Miles after I have like Sunspot Nebula on the board, and it's just like beautiful. The other nice thing about this version of the deck, though, is Daredevil tells you, should I Legion, Spider-Man, or Professor X? Well, sometimes Legion just wins the game right then and there, right? If not, then Spider-Man, Professor X are great. I like this version also a little better on Conquest than Ladder, but we're not going to pretend this isn't super strong because it absolutely is. Legion is Bay. Finally, in the tier, we have Iron Patriot. Iron Patriot is another deck that never goes anywhere. It puts a lot of power down. Thank goodness Den shared a version with Mystique. A lot of versions lately have been cutting Mystique, and I'm just going to say I think that's flat out wrong. I think what this version does wrong is I think that with Iron Lad in the deck, Onslaught is also a must-have, because an Iron Lad that hits an Onslaught is just incredible. Look, sometimes you go like Iron Lad into Onslaught, into like and you've played like a Brood and a Sinister, and then you just drop a Patriot and then an Onslaught, and like you've just got just a bajillion power and you're freaking impossible to beat. But that's always complicated, right? Like, I don't think Invisible Woman is super necessary, but Enchantress is creeping back into the meta, so maybe I'm wrong. Um, the deck is good, right? Like, this is just a good deck. It's a powerful deck. It's a consistent deck. I don't know why. I used to love Patriot. I thought it was a really fun puzzle, but since Iron Lad came out, I think Patriot is far less interesting, even if it is more powerful. This is another really straightforward climber deck. When you win with this deck, though, you're very often winning a lot of lanes by 2 or 3 power, so be ready and be comfortable doing math and counting with this one. Hela Tribunal sneaks into tier 2. This is a version. What is the different card here? There's one card different than Safety's list. This is a version of Safety Blade's list. Giganto. So Safety is running Howard. You can also run Echo. I really, really like a cheap card here over that extra high roll of Giganto, but hey, to each their own. Safety Blade made this list even before the updates. It was running a 5-cost Magic and a 6/6 Tribunal, and it was still good. This list is sick, right? You get to go Invisible Woman with MODOK and Hela behind it if the opponent doesn't have Cosmo, and you've got to try and read who has Cosmo and who doesn't, which is not always easy. Or you get to go Iron Man and with Tribunal and Onslaught in a lane and just put like 20 power in each lane and say, okay, beat me. With one locked off lane, that's very often my go-to because that's like gonna rock that locked off lane. And then Onslaught and Tribunal, like just they're usually enough to win one of the other two, right? Like they're very, very rarely is an opponent actually going above you in both of those other lanes. So it's a super strong way to win a lot of games from Marvel Snap. Be a little careful with Tribunal since the buff because he is now vulnerable to Shang-Chi. It's one of the reasons Invisible Woman is in the deck. Shang-Chi and Enchantress are freaking everywhere, but so is Cosmo. So this is a dangerous play, but it's like super high rolly, and if you retreat well, like you're going to win a ton of 8 cubers with this, right? So you need to retreat well to minimize when that's not going to happen. It's also worth, like, you used to lose a lot of cubes when you were like, all right, I'm going to drop all my big things on the board now with this deck, right? And then, like, they would all go into the wrong lanes. Tribunal mitigates that, so it's not really a concern. Electra and Magic are enablers, and Jubilee and Iron Lad are safeguards. That's the deck. I really like Howard here. I think Howard is, like, one of the best cards for this deck. Echo would be good, but very often you have to put Invisible Woman down before Echo, which makes Echo useless, and then they can get their Cosmo there. Delaying a turn to get Echo with Invisible Woman is not always feasible. Sometimes feasible, not as often as you would like it to be. Negative Surfer sneaks into tier 2. Please stop playing this in Conquest. This is a bad Conquest deck. This is a phenomenal ladder deck. On ladder, you can tell when you're going to roll with this deck. You're going to drop like 70 power, multiple lanes. There's nothing your opponent can do about it. You're going to go Bast into Zabu, into Surfer, into Negative, into Magic, and then you're just gonna say, I'm gonna drop Wong now, and like my negative Wong, and like Mystique, and then Surfer, or I'm going to drop a 0-cost Iron Man, copy that with Mystique, and then Surfer, and give too much power to everything on the last turn of the game. It's incredible. Once your opponent knows you have it, they can save their Cosmo appropriately, they can save their lane changing appropriately to really shut you down. So it's not a good Conquest deck, but on ladder, this deck is like a cube printer. But for the love of God, I've played against this a lot, even on ladder, even at Infinite. Retreat when you don't have it. Like, if you're not seeing enough good combos, you gotta go. Like, this deck can win just on going like Brood, Wong, I don't know, Wolfsbane, Rogue, Magic Surfer, Ironheart Surfer, something along those lines. But like, you're not usually outpowering things that way, right? You're getting reasonably big, right? But you're putting 18, 20 power on the board without any of your big combos, and your opponents can just get bigger than that, right? Like, most opponents at the top end of the meta can get bigger than that. So like, if you don't have it, you can see what your opponent's playing, just go. Don't stay to see the pretty numbers if you're trying to make Infinite. And we're on to tier 3. We're not going to talk about tier 3. I'm just going to run you through these quickly. Destroyer remains good. The Nimrod Galactus builds, they're fine. If you love them, play them. Probably not worth it. We've got straight up Galactus. I think this is significantly worse than the Destroyer versions. I think for a long time, outside of one short window, the Nimrod Galactus has been better than the straight Galactus. I think the straight Galactus is fundamentally dead. I don't think you should be playing that deck. Discard Dracula is really easy to disrupt right now with a lot of stuff. There's still just a little bit too much Spider Ham for this to really work. An Iceman that hits a Modoc beats you. A ill-timed wave. Like, there's just too many things that beat you, and you don't quite get as over the top as power as other decks. Meh. Cerebro 2, I'm a little surprised to see this low. I think it's been really, really strong right now. Maybe it's better in Conquest than on Ladder, because you can take more time to lock things down. But I'd expect this to be performing significantly better based on where the meta has been and what I've seen. Thanos Destroy is about to get huge bumps in like a week. We'll talk more about it then. Or Destroy is about to get huge bumps in like a week. We'll talk about it then. This one is also literally my build. That's pretty cool. Is the other one my build? The other one is a build I've played, but not. Okay. We absolutely don't care about tier 4. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting and informative. I hope you enjoyed this look at the tier list. Remember to check out Snap Judgments Podcast. Check out my YouTube at Snap Judgments Pod. And I'll see you soon for more wonderful Marvel Snap content. Keep an eye on Marvel Snap Zone. Peace.